To talk about transforming lending with AA from risk assessment to recovery, our next panel is ready here. May I please request our moderator, Ms. Shalini Gupta, Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer, Sahamati, to join us on stage. A warm welcome to you, ma'am. And let me also request and welcome our panelists on here to join us on stage, Mr. Amit Talgeri, Chief Risk Officer, Axis Bank, Mr. Ashish Goyal, MD and Group Director, Finance Fibe, Mr. Shachindra Nath, Founder and MD, UGRO Capital, Mr. Vamsi Madhav, Chief Executive Officer, FinVu AA and Lending Identity Credit Access. A warm welcome to all of you, and I request Ms. Shalini to take the lead and begin the proceedings. Thank you.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. We welcome you to a delightful session today. And there is a reason why I'm calling this delightful, because we are talking of a DPI, which started as a delight for the CDOs, the Chief Digital Officers. It was always a delight for the customers, and it is now becoming delighting for the Chief Risk Officers. And it is now a triple delight for the CEOs, right? Something where the CDOs and CROs can marry each other and they're happy with the concept is something which works for the organization. So this is going to be a delightful session today. We are talking about the Account Aggregator framework, which was launched in 2021. It's completed 4 years. And the USP is that it allows the customer to share their data with their consent in a digital, real-time manner, right? Directly from the source. And there are many powerful, features that are available on the framework. And because of which we are today at a point of inflection where we have seen significant adoption coming from the financial sector. Because like I said, it started at something which was a market expansion tool, and now it is emerging as something which can manage risk, specifically digital risks within an organization. So to set the context, I'll just give some numbers so that you do not have to take, that task of updating on the numbers. So Account Aggregator, today we have around 2.212 billion accounts which have the facility of Account Aggregator. Around 800 financial institutions are on the Account Aggregator framework, either as an information provider or as an information user. We have 16 account aggregators who are playing the role of consent manager, like connecting the FIP, FIU, and capturing the consent on behalf of the customer. So playing the powerful role of consent managers. We have 14 live use cases. We started with underwriting PFM, but we have multiple use cases which the panelist will take us through. And every month around 2 crore consents and 40 crore data shares are happening via this framework. So the number is huge. Our estimate says that around 9 to 10% of the population has already used the Account Aggregator framework in some form and fashion. And the idea and the takeaway for us from this session is to basically expand the universe of both the users and the consumers of the Account Aggregator framework. With this, I'll welcome our panelists here. We have a diverse panel. We've got, a CRO from a large bank dealing in all products, all customer segments, and more so, beyond lending, also into deposits, transactions. So it's basically representative of everything we use in financial world today. We have got, a CEO from MSME lending company, which has actually, kind of got us into a space where we as a country feel that, there is a lot that needs to be done, which is MSME lending. Shachindra, we have Ashish, who is working in low-income salaried customer segment. He has been at the forefront of Account Aggregator adoption, and we have the all-powerful Account Aggregator, who is facilitating all of, these use cases. So starting with Amit, given that you are heading one of the most, high-growth bank in the country, and we all hear about, managing risk and growth in a bank. In that context, where do you see Account Aggregator fitting in, your organizational priorities? How do you see it? Is it a strategic lever? Is it an operational tool? Where do you see it fitting in your scheme of things?
First of all, thank you, Shalini, for inviting me on the panel. And it's an absolute privilege to be here along with my esteemed panelists. Very good question, because today there are multiple levers where account aggregator is being used, and suddenly I realize, given the last 7-10 days when I was doing up a little bit of my reading, was that there are so many use cases that we're not explored yet. But let me just give you the most obvious one, which is lending. Right from application, processing to saving time on documentation, inputs into scorecards and models, for example, the number of bank accounts that somebody has, the transactions that somebody does today, all of that is part of the lending journeys. So that's what I would call the most obvious use case. But there are multiple use cases that I think are not explored enough, especially on the self-employed side. On salaried, as probably Ashish would tell you, you'd still have a lot more perfect information available. But on self-employed, we don't seem to get that much information. So that's where the account aggregator framework will actually help us get a lot of information which today, banks are struggling for, or rather all financial institutions are struggling for in terms of lending. The next one is clearly in terms of fraud management. You keep hearing about mule accounts, you keep hearing about what's happening on transaction monitoring, you worry about end use. So that's a very, very big, large use case for us as a bank, where we leverage account aggregator in terms of transaction monitoring, end use, misuse of funds, etc. Those are where I would probably say that's a second end use, the lever that we have looked at. The third, slightly different, is in terms of personal financial management, which is today with the account aggregator framework, we do have access to information on not just accounts, but also, let's say, deposits, stocks, mutual funds, etc. So you could actually have a one view. So today, for example, on the Axis app, you can get a one view of someone's, a 360-degree view of their wealth, accounts, transactions, all of it together. And finally, from a very different use case, if I were to look at, is the employee use case, which is we have 1 lakh employees today. As a bank, we need to also be keeping a close watch on what's happening on accounts. The account aggregator also helps us track information on employees as well. More from a, again, risk monitoring point of view, because the expectation from the regulator also is that employees of banks have a certain standard and a code of conduct which is not just exercised in your own bank account, but in multiple bank accounts. So to that extent, these are 3 or 4 levers that, as you can see, very varied, from lending to fraud to employee monitoring. Each of them have use cases, and this is what I'm just telling you where we are in it today. And I'm sure there are more that we probably need to explore as well.
Sure. No, so I think that's interesting to know, and we'll also come back to you and see how, what is the scale-up plan and how do you plan to kind of ensure that it reaches to every department and product and customer segment. So Ashish, over to you. You have been at the forefront, and if you could tell us about your account aggregator journey in terms of, how and when it caught your fancy and where is it today, right? In terms of the penetration of account aggregator within your organization. If you could highlight that, it will be really useful for all of us to hear.
Thanks. So first thing, it's a delight also for the CFOs also.
Okay.
The price of the account aggregators also has brought down the price of accessing information. Just to give a context, we are a consumer lender. We lend money on a mobile application. We have only office in Pune, but we operate across India. We get about 2 million customers a month, and we process them digitally. Sitting in Pune, almost 90% plus customers get digitally processed. And account aggregators, bureaus, everything plays a very, very critical role in finding those information. If we go back a little bit, about let's say 5 years back, it was getting a PDF or scraping the bank statement using some of the partners who has done that very well, including Perfios, who is the gold sponsors here. So which has really, really been the case. But with account aggregator coming in, the data democratization has happened. The difference between data the holders as well as the users of the data has diminished a lot, because it just creates you at the same level. Your ability to get the data is very strong. It reduces frauds, it reduces the time to process the data, etc. Today 70% of, but the biggest one is the customer experience. It just put an OTP and the data is with you. You can process it and give a result within milliseconds back to the consumer saying that whether your loan application is approved or rejected, top it up along with eKYCs, etc. And it is absolutely a journey which can be done at 12 o'clock in the night. No human intervention, and the entire journey can be delivered to the consumers. So from that perspective, it is account aggregators have played a big role. Today, 70% of our consumers prefer account aggregators over other lines, and our belief is that over a period of time, it will continue to do so. Rather, in many of our journeys, we have removed all other options. Only option is available is account aggregator as a platform, that this is the only way you can access our applications, because it's so consumer friendly, and I think pushing them to nudge them to do that piece is very, very critical. So that's the first piece. The second is the quality of data which comes from here can be enhanced much further. Today, as we go along, we were talking outside like GST network data, mutual fund informations. Like today, credit card data is not available. If the credit card data is available, you can actually look at their spend patterns. You can look at their many things to really underwrite that customer better. You can see that whether there is what all is happening across the board. You can actually access multiple bank accounts and process them together. Today, in the earlier era, it was just impossible to ask a customer to give 3 bank statements separately.
Sure.
So all those things has really led to a massive inclusion in my mind for everyone. For the consumer, it is so easy. For us, price is lower, the data quality has improved, the access of data became very, very democratized. And one of the things, while digressing and going a little bit more on the economy side, whether we talk about UPI, whether we talk about account aggregators, India took time, but when they came in, they came with the solutions which has really created at a scale, which can execute at a scale, and they really brought public-private partnerships to ensure that while they build the public infrastructures, but get delivered through private players, like whether it is PhonePays or the Googles at the UPI side, or the Vamsis and the others building on the account aggregator side. So I think the entire network coming together, where bureau plus account aggregators plus KYC network really has created a massive, for the, whether we talk about self-employed, Sellerite, it is just a addition. You can keep thinking and visualizing, like when Amit was talking, couple of, I said, oh, yes, this can also be done. Right. I think it's account aggregator has really has changed the way we can do things.
Yeah. So Shachindra, the next question is to you. You're actually in a segment which is a national priority for the country, MSME lending, and when account aggregator was visualized, the idea was to expand the market to segments which have difficulty in accessing credit, right? And MSME is one of them. In fact, the whole idea of getting GST banking on account aggregator was to unlock that segment. So what is your view on the account aggregator framework as your organization? Where do you think it is fitting in and trying, it is delivering value for you as an organization, and obviously then to the end consumer as well?
Thanks, Shalini. Thanks for inviting me on this. Actually, for UGRO, over a period of last 4 years, we have built around 15,500 crore of lending business for MSME, roughly around 2.5 lakh plus customers for us. We have presence across 350 physical location. But I think what is most important in when we started our journey, just prior to IL&FS crisis and during COVID period of time, we have worked on 3 big trends. First trend was that the informal economy of MSME would converge to formal economy, and that we saw as an impact of demonetization, which we run the campaign Kache to Pakke ki journey, right? So MSME was generally a business which was in Kacha. As it would keep converting into Pakka, credit would start enhancing. Second, the big trend which we worked upon, that as the behavioral change or shift would happen from informal to formal, credit would be possible. But to assess that credit, data would become the prominent force around it, which we call India Stack 2. because reason consumer financing in India became prospered because of the prosperity of the bureau and its enrichment of the data and how digitization and underlying economy. So when GST came in force, to lend to an MSME customer, you need three things. You need understand his intent, understand his behavioral aspect and eligibility, and third is his repayment capability. So पहली जिसको हम बोलते हैं मंशा होनी चाहिए, उसके बाद बिजनेस ठीक होना चाहिए, एंड देन और ये सब भी ठीक है, बट रीपेमेंट कैपेबिलिटी. एंड वी रियलाइज दैट द कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ थ्री थिंग्स, हिज GST टर्नओवर डेटा, his banking cash flow, and repayment behavior on bureau, if you combine the three, the credit becomes extremely easy. Yeah. So we, last 6-7 years, we invested heavily and built India's first patented proprietary platform called Grow Score, which ingests the data from GST, from the banking, and from the bureau. Now, obviously, biggest friction in this, is the banking data. And that's why when account aggregation was launched, we felt that, it's a, golden moment for us. The physical movement of that data the ingestion of that would start happening from the account aggregation side. So for us, it is still fairly critical. In fact, I remember, he will remember, 2 years back, I wrote him in a nasty mail saying, "आप FinVu हमारा, account aggregation आप लोग कैसे लोग, आप लोगों को तो business करने में कोई interest ही नहीं है." Because nobody even comes follow us with us that how you can increase. Our penetration at that time was 4% on account aggregation. Obviously, Vamsi did an effort, went to our branches, understand user journey, and that we have taken now it to almost 25-30% odd. So that I think so for our customer segment is 25 lakh turnover to 15 crore turnover. We have around 75 lakh crore of credit gap there, and that's why account aggregation would play a massive role, right? That's why I was talking to you, why GST is not yet in, because when you go to a customer and he gives you single OTP, if you can ingest all data at that point, credit becomes available. But this problem is a very unique problem, right? So we have two Baniyas sitting over here, right? So you're Gupta, you're Goyal. मैं आप दोनों से आपके गोत्र पूछूं तो आपके अलग-अलग गोत्र हैं, right? तो आज की जनरेशन में तो लोगों को गोत्र पता ही नहीं होता. My daughter doesn't know what her गोत्र is. Yeah. So हम लोग कायस्थ हैं. कायस्थों की एक खासियत होती है, हम सगोत्रा होते हैं. हिंदुस्तान में कायस्थी एक ऐसी कास्ट है जहाँ पे सबका गोत्र कश्यप होता है. इसलिए हमारे यहाँ शादियों में कोई झंझट ही नहीं होता. अब तो खैर कोई पूछता नहीं कि जात क्या, अभी तो लड़का लड़की है तो शादी हो जाती है. So, but the problem of account aggregation is that you are trying to intermingle thousands of gotra and trying to marry them, right? तो इसको सगोत्रा बनाना है, right? Exactly. So जैसे आधार में हुआ, जब तक आप इसको uniformity across the all ecosystem you will not bring, unless you don't end the friction, right? This would not take up. So first and foremost, RBI didn't made it compulsory for all the banks. That's why, obviously, bank had this power on their current account. So first, for banks to actually agree that they will let go the power of having the access to the data was very, very difficult. Fortunately, because of DFS pushing public sector bank and all of that, that is gone because bank finally मान गया कि भाई हम जो दे रहे हैं तो हम ले भी तो रहे हैं ना. So banks are also buyers of the asset from others. So that's why that got literally solved. But now there are other components. So in fact, I was just telling Vamsi that I was coming here, I was calling our CEO, saying, "Abhi क्यों नहीं चल रहा? अभी क्या problem है?" We realized that in tier 2, tier 3 towns, 50% of customers bank account in cooperative banks. Now what you do with them? Second, in all of our cases, we take joint accounts, husband and wife both. So अभी बैंक स्टेटमेंट तो RM जाता है, दोनों का बैंक स्टेटमेंट ले आता है और सिस्टम में अपलोड कर देता है. अब जॉइंट अकाउंट के लिए उसको 4 बार फ़ोन करना पड़ेगा, मैडम आप अपना OTP दे दीजिए, आप अपना OTP दे दीजिए. फिर GST के लिए उसको 3rd बार कॉल करना पड़ेगा. सो द जर्नी बिकम्स कॉम्प्लेक्स. एक अकाउंट जो फिजिकल में लॉगिन हो जाता है 1 घंटे में, अगर हम सब कुछ डिजिटली करना चाहें तो 4 घंटे लगते हैं. तो RM सोचता है दिन में मेरे को 10 फाइल लॉगिन करनी है, तो उससे अच्छा तो फिजिकली जाओ स्कूटर पे, पेपर इकट्ठा करके लाओ, स्कैन करो, अपलोड कर दो. So digitization has to improve the productivity and efficiency and customer experience. But actually it is, reverse of that. Now, at the top, we think that because this data is digital, what you were saying, we can manage portfolio well, we can fetch these data concurrently. But on ground, this is the difficulty. And that's why Sahamati has to play, I was telling you, you have to be a noisy boy. You have to create so much of noise that people listen about it and say कि इसमें सगोत्रा शादियाँ कराएंगे.
Sir, noisy girl.
Yeah, both, sorry. It's gender neutral.
That's a very powerful way of explaining, and in fact, that's what we aspire to. So, Shachindra, that basically it has to become a single channel access for all financial data, because we realize that unless that happens, we'll still be, we'll solve one leg of the problem, but you'll still be doing the running around for the rest. So, it doesn't make sense. So as a lender, and I think we'll need representations from all of you again to kind of make it powerful, but we'll definitely see a lot of movement in the next 6 months coming. So Vamsi, the next question is to you. While everyone has talked about use cases, but you are the one who is implementing it across lenders, across all financial institutions. So what has been your sense on the powerful use cases that have emerged in the last 1.5, 2 years? And where do you see this going?
I had a lot of data in my head. Shachindra ji ke gotra shadi narrative ne pura saaf kar diya. I'll have to recover. No, but no, great point actually, and wonderful to hear all of this. Very, very sort of gratifying to see that we've reached a point where there is a good base on which we can grow. So the way I lay out how we look at use cases, right? And most of the folks in the audience would know. At the core of this is RBI's view about there being 5 use cases, right? So let's take as the center, right? 5 different purposes that RBI said could be used. You overlay on top of that the financial need. And I think lending was always the big boy in the narrative, but there was also wealth advisory as sort of a second need that a individual has, right? When the ecosystem started 3 years ago, we saw fundamentally, the purpose of underwriting for typically an NTC sort of a borrower, who wants to give data as the hero product. Now we are seeing that is expanding a lot to needs of, like this says, monitoring and recovery. So we are seeing many of the lenders now having derived comfort in terms of the journey, in terms of all the hard work they've done on the technology side, on the UX side, on the funnel side, are very easily bolting on additions to the journey to say, okay, now I also want to take consent for monitoring, I also want to take consent for defaulter collection, and we are seeing, so to give you some number, we all know this on a month-on-month basis, the ecosystem is growing at about 10% roughly if you take the consents fulfilled. We are seeing the monitoring and collection piece go at 20%.
Okay.
So in the last 1 year and so on. The third layer on top of this is really the persona of the user. So it was always the lender or the investor. Like Amit said, now we are seeing the employee becoming a persona. So one of the interesting use cases that's picked up a lot is insider trading compliance that SEBI has for a lot of the securities firms and generally listed companies, being able to take account aggregator-led holdings information for all the employees. And we're seeing a lot of, benefit that people are seeing because you've got to take data not just of the employee, but also related parties of the employee. It can be fairly cumbersome, and Account Aggregator solves for that, right? So that's sort of the third layer we're seeing it as a persona. The fourth layer on top of this is the context. Is it digital only or is it phygital? So initially it was just digital. Now in the last 1.5 years, we suddenly see a lot of, in fact, banks have started, and NBFCs too, but banks which have a lot of branches are starting to monitor the field force adoption of Account Aggregator. The metric they're measuring is not just the success rate, but also how much are you pushing. I had one bank saying they monitor whether a field agent actually at least attempts thrice before resorting to a non-account aggregator way. So we're seeing, like Ashish mentioned, we see even big banks now sunset, PDF uploads and only depend upon Account Aggregator. So we're seeing a lot of sort of context from pure digital to phygital expansion. And that is expanding also in terms of the form factors. From pure app, we've begun experiments in terms of looking at, say, WhatsApp or looking at voice. And we see a lot more interest in now reaching out to the segment where it is not just DIY, somebody who has an access to device, somebody who's literate. That is typically the first persona, but now people are saying now that it's crossed 100 million, the next 200 million has to come from sort of this, like you said, tier 2, assisted and also not very device friendly. We're seeing experiments on that. And the fourth and final expansion that we see is in the loan product itself. From pure consumer durable to an unsecured PL to obviously the holy grail is cash flow lending for SME. We still have to catch up on that. But vehicle finance, and I think hopefully in the next 6 to 9 months when RBI's efforts at bringing joint and corporate accounts finish, I mean, the good news is that in February they started the whole move of formally giving timelines for joint and corporate. Then we will also see all the secured lending products sort of adapt and adopt A. So that's sort of the trajectory of use case.
So what I'm hearing is that basically it started from underwriting in personal loan, but it is expanding across
to
the
all.
products, across the use cases, as well as the personas on which this account aggregator framework. So it's a three-dimensional.
It's a three-dimensional thing. I think it's
expansion.
personas, it's not just financial needs, but also the provider's needs of collection, monitoring, etc. And it's form factors of context.
Right.
From different types of devices to assisted and digital only. I think it's a 3D expansion of the core premise of bringing in raw data in a convenient and safe way.
And in fact, just to add to what you've said, we have heard from lenders that, while you said that up to 3 attempts they are asked to use account aggregator, we've heard of a lender who, even if they end up collecting data manually, PDF, if A is not working, they try to get a account aggregator fetch later on to ensure that, everything they've got from this customer was, right, and to ensure that there's no fraud involved. And another very powerful statement I've heard is that they are actually waiving off certain fraud checks also for customers who give data through A.
Yeah.
You're talking of some sort of a green channel kind of use cases also coming up where you reduce further checks for the customers and make it more easier for them.
Correct.
To access credit.
So I do want to take pause to also use this to say, I think the recurring power of account aggregator is also not fully, I think, I was just talking to Shachindra ji earlier, I think the whole all important power of account aggregator is in the fact that now you can legitimately get recurring consent, legitimately, with proper explicit informed consent. And that I think is not yet been really adopted at scale, which I think is a huge.
And especially for the, especially in the, when you give personal loans and short-term loans, let's say supply chain or when we do a 6 to 12 month funding, this kind of monitoring is really, really helpful for us to assess their income increase, seeing their monitoring, putting them on high alert or increasing their limits. So from everywhere's perspective, it becomes very automated, become less intrusive or more intrusive, I don't know. But you really have a lot of data which is coming in and really helping. And one piece which we are now thinking as a customer experience is the PFM, which is like how can we offer really as a service to our consumers. While it doesn't make money for us, but at the end, just providing a wholesome view to him about entire thing with mutual funds coming in, etc. It can be very, very powerful.
Sure. Yeah. So, Amit, I'll just, because we are talking about use cases, given that, we've already spoken about lending and the power of recurring, but as a banker, I think, you also have, deposits, you also have payments, transactions, and you also have a huge branch network. And we all hear about, digital frauds, mule accounts. So I think that is a use case which we have heard some, use cases coming up, but nothing has been implemented on the ground. So anything from, as a banker, which you think, outside lending, which can be powerful on the account aggregator framework?
Yeah, so you're right. So I think I mentioned it very briefly in terms of this whole transaction monitoring earlier used to be probably very, very nascent, very initial stages, etc. But now with the amount of digital frauds that are happening, with I4C being so powerful now in terms of the ability for a customer to immediately call a digital fraud and the expectation that banks need to act quickly, then the need to have access to information of all the banks in the ecosystem so that the fraud money is not going out quickly becomes very, very important. And that's where mule accounts become very important. Like, I was just kind of mentioning to someone, today, let's see, if I were to kind of go back maybe 2 years ago, over leveraging was just a terminology that we kind of talked about. Credit hungriness, this is something that we talked about. Now suddenly, over the last 24 months, we've suddenly built credit models for unsecured, which includes inquiries, number of unsecured loans, etc. You will now start seeing some of the account aggregators in terms of how many accounts does this person have. Even to open a current account, I may want to put that into my model to see whether if somebody is having 7 accounts and 8 accounts, what kind of a risk am I doing? Do I need to do enhanced due diligence when somebody is opening the account? Because these are potential mule accounts, which is where all of the money flow is really happening. So these are use cases, and you're right, Shalini. Some of these are untested right now, but you can actually imagine this to be a very, very powerful use case in terms of transaction monitoring. I think Ashish talked about early warning signals. Again, same logic. Suddenly you see, gaming, you're seeing stock markets. You want to genuinely look at end use, whether it is salaried, whether it is self-employed. And if you don't have access to some of this information, then your ability to do early warning in terms of what you can do with that customer is going to be a challenge. Credit cards, for example, if somebody is running up spends and you want to kind of cut limits, you want to see what's happening in the ecosystem. The bureau probably is slightly more dated. This is real time in that sense. You could probably have triggers which, kind of ensure that you can do. Again, while I'm saying all of this, these are what are potential use cases that are currently in the works, but clearly very powerful use cases given the bank's requirement to look at the liability side of the business, especially given the growing menace of mule accounts.
Great. No, so I think that's another powerful addition to the use case repository of Account Aggregator. And if there are any kind of, regulatory approvals and all needed for the lenders, I think, to the extent we are hearing about suggestions nowadays, this is something which is significantly milder, customer friendlier and easier to implement. So we'll be happy to make that representation. So we'll move now to the impact section, and I'll request the two, because NBFCs have been at the forefront. So to share some quantifiable impacts, like some numbers, like we all understand the use cases, but in terms of either, expanding the market or reduction in cost, risk, what has been your read? And with some numbers, it will be really interesting for the audience.
No, like I spoke, today we use Account Aggregator in almost 70% of our applications comes through Account Aggregators. The one more thing which we started doing it, whenever you take a PDF, and especially when you are a digital, which is NT of what Sachin does, but people drop off. Nahi karna hai, app delete kar diya, and they left. For us, that is the biggest loss. Means it's really very, very tough to ask a customer to download the app again. So you need to reduce the friction. And that's where you try to do many things, surrogates, etc., to say that how can I really avoid taking a bank statement? Today, rather, there is an active discussion happening internally saying that, can I take bank statement before taking a bureau also? No, because bureau cost is higher than the bank statement. No, and just put a OTP and your bank statement is coming. So from that perspective, the data is much richer because you see a day-to-day spends, kitna UPI transaction kiya hai, how much he spent on gaming. Like we look at them very actively, that those are the variables which goes into our scorecards. And at the end of the day, we call ourselves, we are data junkies. We just want more and more data to really look at it and come back with the answers. So one is that we use extensive, when the first time Account Aggregator came, we were the front to say that we want to use it. There were errors, there were bank statements where the opening plus transaction, it was not matching with the balances, but still we went ahead, still built on it, kept on believing that kuch to nikal hi aayega, and but today that framework has evolved a lot. So from that perspective, there is a huge impact in my mind. Second, it also allows me, like from tier 1, tier 2, see, putting an OTP with a UPI means that it is like just a UPI transaction. Means you just come on this piece, you see your account, select it, an OTP comes from the bank, which is self-filled by the applications, and just done. And and by the time the transaction is done, he gets an approval. So from that perspective, it is an absolute delight for even tier 2, tier 3 cities. We do financial assistance at education institutes. We do at clinics. And there, Actually, my teams comes back and say that आप सब बंद कर दीजिए, सिर्फ account aggregator रखिए. Purely because it is so easy to explain to the consumer. Sir, there is OTP, just put the OTP and it is done. No, you don't need to go to the bank, download कि यहाँ पे click कीजिए, इसमें जाकर यहाँ से PDF निकालिए, mobile PDF नहीं चलेगा सर, आपको website का PDF चाहिए या email PDF चाहिए. All those things is gone. So from that perspective, it is absolutely approval increase. It increases the customer experience, and on the top, we can use this data to show back to the consumer through PFM, saying that, look, you are using this money from these places, and then the monitoring becomes a real use case, which we are building on it. There are variables which are becoming more stronger and stronger, like what Amit spoke. If customer is doing account aggregator, there is fraud checks which are reduced purely because I don't need to worry about कि यार उसने PDF में क्या किया है. Today, the world in the AI world, the PDFs are so easy to manipulate. So from that perspective, there is a huge improvement in it. I believe there is still lot more data points which needs to be integrated and can be done it. One of the problem statements which we see is that you need to take which problem statement or the right framework is a perspective that if I have 4 accounts, I need to really put 4 OTPs to get access to 4 accounts. If there are mutual funds, then those are the additional OTPs. So which means that to get a full picture, he has to really enter a lot of OTPs. So how do we really ensure that there is a way to create a unified experience out there, say, and especially for lending where or the mule accounts where you really need to have that experience to ensure that you give a full picture to the lender while lending the money. So I think means as you give more, the demand keep on increasing from the people who want to use it. But my belief is that it's a amazing the way we have been forefront doing this use case. We believe that there is still a lot of things can be done here. And I think in next 12 months time, many of the journeys will just have account aggregation embedded into it, PDF, the net banking, etc. are on their sunset.
Great. So Shachindra, I think one is impact, and the second is also your experience of implementing it in an assisted journey, because like digital, because it's a digital framework, it is easier to embed. But obviously on the assisted side, the benefit is that if the customer doesn't understand, there is someone to explain. So we've been hearing mixed views, right?
I'll answer. We see better adoption in assisted ones.
That was what I wanted to, yeah. So what is your experience, and how has your organization created an acceptance at the organizational level, the branch level, the agents for the AA framework? So what are the challenges you see there, and how are you working on that?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. At the top, we all believe that the cost efficiency, more so the turnaround time, the portfolio management, ingestion of data. We have built massive machine learning platform, which runs our score, and that accuracy of banking data is predominantly so. As what he was saying that obviously PDF, you have to not only ingest data from PDF, but you have to ensure accuracy. Even in PDF data, 30% of our PDF upload required curation, right? Because still, there is a lot of curation which need to be done, which is a friction, it changes the turnaround time. Now, when we were last 2 years, 1.5 years back, when I spoke to Vamsi, when I saw the adoption rate to be only 4%, we realized what is the challenge? And we realized there are twin challenges. One within our sales forces and credit, there is no push to adopt it. Right? So that is the first and foremost problem, because people behaviorally, when they get used to something, change is the biggest resistance. Right? So that you have to push. Second is also customer and their understanding. I'll give you, there are 3 examples. So when UPI came, right, the first app which was launched, and which was launched by Prime Minister Modi himself, was Bheem, right? But if you ask me how much of volume today happens through Bheem versus how much volume happened to Google Pay, Phone Pay, Paytm, Bheem doesn't generate so much of volume. So why it has happened that all of the volumes have gone to the other players? Right. So it has happened because unlike payment platforms, which were able to raise very significant amount of capital on a future promise of this would build something very big, while revenue model for UPI got defunct after that, but still their capacity to burn cash, to onboard a customer and then bring them onto UPI rails was done by the private player. Have you ever heard of an account aggregator raising $500 million at $10 billion valuation? The day that would happen, some of these account aggregators would create the market. So I think so some of this problem is that the capital providers have not yet seen the massive potential of what they saw on the UPI. Because somebody has to create market. आपको कोई ज़रूरत नहीं थी कि एक हर दुकान के ऊपर एक डब्बा लगाएं और उसमें अमिताभ बच्चन बोलें, देवी और सज्जनों आपके पैसे से मिलने से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. But look at the sheer impact of that. Once that box came in, UPI became, day's flavor, right? But अभी कहाँ किस account aggregator ने ये implement किया कि हर merchant के दुकान पे जब भी account aggregation के through उसका एक जाए तो वो अमिताभ बच्चन जी बोले देवी और सज्जनों बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. So that is one big problem. One big problem that account aggregation and its potential is yet not realized in the broader ecosystem. And that's second is that once that would happen, the friction at the customer level would go. So one is lenders have to do a conscious effort to get this adapted, which we are all doing it because we understand it is potential. Unlike Amit, we are not being able to, stop it because then it would impact the business. But at some point in time, we have to do it. But second is at the customer level, the awareness need to be done. If you have to transition from a phone pay to a Paytm to a third Google Pay, it's so seamless. You just don't even understand कि backend पे क्या हो रहा है. आप किसी भी ऐप को लॉगिन करिए, मोबाइल नंबर डालिए, आपका अकाउंट कहीं भी वो फैच हो जाता है, right? So हम कोई डिफरेंशिएट थोड़ी करते हैं कि Paytm में क्या हो. Look at the Paytm when their payment back gone banned. Did any of us ever got bothered with the backend पे वो कितना hassling रहा होगा? But वो account aggregation में नहीं है. So I think so that's the problem. तो आपको जाके कुछ $2-4 बिलियन पे 500 मिलियन पैसा उठाना चाहिए. उसके बाद सब सही हो जाएगा. अभी आप सब लोग हमारे कॉस्ट पे ये बिल्ड करना चाहते हैं. आप अपनी कॉस्ट पे बिल्ड करिए तो हम तो फी प्रोवाइडर है ना. तो हमें पैसा मिलना चाहिए. तो वो प्रॉब्लम ये है, जब तक आप लोग ये खर्चा नहीं करेंगे ना, तो हम तो चिंदी चोर हैं. हम तो हर चीज़ में सोचेंगे कैसे कम से कम पैसा हमारा लगता रहे.
शुरुआत में जब डिलाइटफुल इंट्रोडक्शन हुआ था, मेरे को डर था कि कहीं हमारे इन्वेस्टर्स यहाँ बैठे ना हो, क्यों वो कहेंगे सब तो डिलाइट हो रहे हैं, आप हमें डिलाइट क्यों नहीं कर रहे हो. तो anyway, but you're right. I think we have to.
So I think
follow the money.
the model is largely B2B2C, and we need to have some B2C, account aggregators coming in. Like that is one part, and even as lenders, while it is easier to say, but they are the biggest beneficiaries. A lot of consumer awareness expenditure.
No, absolutely, and I think look, DPI has absolutely reduced the cost from what a bank statement would cost. It has come down 50 times lesser today. So there's truly delight for most, if not all, of people on this panel. It has reduced the cost of fraud detection. Overall, massive reduction in cost has happened, and it's become a utility play for many of us, right? So I think the second point I want to say is that it is fine to say UPI, but payments is a daily use case. Data sharing is not going to be a daily use case. Yeah. How many times are we going to share our data every day and for what use cases? So I think the UPI analogy goes thus far but no further. We have to find a model in which data becomes an asset and is truly used. But at the same time, I think we have to be very wide-eyed in terms of what use case. And also, I'm a big votary now. As we've been working on with DPDP now, we must find the way for consumers to be even more comfortable with sharing their data, because now there is an overarching law of the land. Earlier it was not there, it was only account aggregator, but now there is. So that should make data sharing even more democratic. And those kinds of unlocks we should focus on. And then we'll get Amitabh Bachchan ji.
Yes. So I think we just have we have to wind up, but I think we'll just quickly go around the table with Amit. Your one wish list from the account aggregator framework.
I think we are solving a lot of problems, but the biggest problem that probably needs to get solved is getting entities into it, which is self-employed, partnerships, companies. If we can solve that one large issue, which is your biggest pain point today for lenders, I would say that's the one. If I were to add another one, because there is a lot of use cases that we talk about, if I put on my true risk hat, I also want to look at what is responsible AA looking like, which is consent, that we are not overdoing it, that customers don't get bombarded with OTP requests, information requests based on that data mining that we do. So that's the two wish lists that I probably have.
Definitely. Ashish?
For me, the first is like I spoke, how do we really have and DPDP can solve this piece, or the regulations needs to solve this, that can a single OTP can create me to fetch the data from multiple sources. And of course, the wish list of more data, I think it is just a matter of time. So because there is already a path that whether it is mutual fund, credit cards, loan accounts, we would be more than happy to give our own data also, because bureaus has their own ways of publishing. But once we see the data, let's say if I see 3 trade lines and I see there are granular data is coming in from the other loan accounts, maybe that would be useful. So that's the one point. But second point, which Shachindra mentioned, and which can be $1 billion for you, would be that how do we really create a B2C kind of environment? Like, just to think of it, like when LinkedIn came, people said that when I give my house on rent, I check the LinkedIn of the person who is taking the house on rent. Similarly, can there be algorithms built in which become democratized, saying that, okay, let's say FinVu score of A means this customer, while you don't give the data, because people B2B, C2C will not see this data, but can there be a visibilities where these use cases can be built, where it can become a trust score based on the bank statements, etc. Can you create a score which can really help you in like a bureau, and which can be a very, very big use case for creating that kind of an environment, like for CODs, for various other use cases.
So Ashish,
We
I
really,
think
really
we'll have to, but I'll quickly want to hear one statement, wish list from Shachindra and one from Vamsi, and then we'll close quickly.
I'll do it very quickly. I think so. Look, AA actually came in 2016, got active in 2021. We are in 2025. 10 years is a very long journey. Right? Aadhaar-enabled UPI took 3 years to kick off. This is what is important. Aadhaar-enabled UPI became because भारत सरकार को नरेगा का पैसा लोगों के हाथ में देना था. And इसकी important थी, that's why UPI got created. So I think that the time has come that we bring account aggregation at the forefront of policy making, so that all of this friction get away. So that role we have to play. जहाँ भारत सरकार को समझाना पड़ेगा कि सर ये आप इसके सारे फ्रिक्शन खत्म कर दीजिए, तो हिंदुस्तान में 15-20 करोड़ नए MSME को लोन मिल सकता है. इससे 25 कम से कम 20-10 करोड़ का नया एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट होगा, उससे आपको वोट मिलेगा. ये नैरेटिव अगर हम बिल्ड कर पाए तो ये सब कुछ सॉल्व हो जाएगा.
Yes, great. Vamsi?
मैं विश है कि ये सारी आइडियाज हम इम्प्लीमेंट करें 1 साल में, इन्हीं को बेचें और $1 बिलियन वैल्यूएशन ले लें. That is all. That's about it.
We'll take this. Yeah. Thank you.